Hey guys, welcome back to For the Classical Guitarist. My name is John, and in this video I'm going to be reacting to different instruments playing the famous classical guitar piece, Recuerdos de la Alhambra. Now, many of you guys that follow the channel, I'm sure, have played this piece before. If not, you're very familiar with how this piece sounds. But if by chance you don't know this piece, which is totally fine, definitely go ahead and just YouTube it, check it out, find some videos of people playing it, and then come back and watch this piece. Anyway, let's get started. So before I get started, I want to go ahead and say that none of what I talk about, hopefully, will be talking about the playing of the players in these videos. So the first one that we're going to see is going to be a flute and piano duet. And why I chose this is because even though there's tons of guitar and flute versions of this piece, I figured taking the guitar out of it entirely will make it a bit more unique, hopefully. Anyway, let's go ahead and see what they do. Alright, so we had this little opening before the melody comes in. It sounds nice as opposed to, bam, melody. Okay, so the first thing I noticed that I liked a lot with just this is that because you're doing it one on piano, which is a much fuller instrument in a way, meaning it literally has a wider range, and you have the melody being done on a separate instrument, you're able to do a lot more with the accompaniment. I think that makes it so much clearer in terms of what is going on and what you can do to show where the things are going, where they're moving to. With a guitar, unfortunately, we're only able to have this little simple back and forth bass line. Which again, it works for the guitar one, but to have more freedom with that accompaniment, I think works a little bit better. Okay, so with an instrument like the flute, it's so easy to have such a clear sort of melody. Okay, so some of the things that the piano player is doing in the right hand, to me personally, are a bit much. They're kind of distracting from the melody, and the melody is supposed to be the main thing. And the accompaniment should be kind of simple. I think it's okay to add little embellishments here and there to make it sound like, oh cool, something else is happening and we're moving forward a bit more, but too much definitely distracts from the melody, so I don't totally love what they're doing there. But it's a cool idea, just personally I don't know if I like it so much. Alright, that's one thing that sounds way easier. So as guitar players, if you guys play this piece, I'm sure as you know, one thing that is probably one of the tougher things in this piece is getting those slurs nice and crisp. What I loved about this is just how effortless the flute player made it seem. I'm not saying flute is easier, by the way. I'm just saying that in this instance, that it seems that doing that technique on the flute is easier than doing that kind of slur on the guitar. Anyway, let's do a bit more before we change on to another instrument. Alright, cool. And then this is the last thing I'm going to talk about for this segment of the video, which is just because they're doing it on different instruments, it gives both of them, I already talked about the accompaniment, but it also gives the person playing the melody a little bit more flexibility to maybe add some adaptations, add some ornaments, slight improvisations possibly to the melody to make them sound a bit more interesting, to change it up a little bit. And on the guitar, unfortunately, because we're so limited by having to find these shapes that work to do the melody and the accompaniment, there's really no room to add little, or at least add noticeable differences like that. We can do a few things, but not like they're doing there. Whether or not I like that, to me, it sounds a bit much. But it is cool that it's possible and seeing what people do when they are given that freedom in their playing. Anyway, let's go ahead and go on over to the next instrument. Alright, so this next one is going to be solo violin. Now this one, I have to say, I have actually seen this exact video before, but what I will say is seeing this is what kind of gave me the idea to do this whole video in the first place. So let's see what we have going on. Alright, so my first thought is when you're playing on an instrument like a solo string instrument where you can't really do more than one note at once, at least not with the traditional technique used in there, you kind of get this whole big hopping feel, which is okay for things like the cello suites and other violin pieces, especially because that music was originally written for that kind of sound in mind. With this piece, the whole point of this piece is that you have this kind of illusion of this continuing bass line just going back and forth in the background, kind of like a drone, with this imitation of a sustaining melody over the whole entire thing. And I think that with this kind of this constant back and forth between the melody note, bass note, melody note, bass note, kind of takes away from that. But let's talk about some more things. Let's see what else he does. So yeah, like I said before, the big thing is there have to be a lot of adaptations that make it even possible to play an instrument. You can't get the same illusion that you get on the guitar through a solo violin. You could get a different one, but you can't get the same one, and because of that, I think it really takes away that illusion that this piece is trying to create. Now, what I will say is I think the violin could do this piece very well, especially because the violin has a great way to really dive and dig into those dynamics. Like literally, when they dig in, they're going with the bow. I think that would work great for this piece, but trying to play it on solo violin just doesn't work, at least not for me. So before I say anything else, I do want to say that the person playing this on violin is playing it very well. But from my personal opinion, it just doesn't work on the violin, at least not on solo violin. Anytime he tries to do anything musical, you notice these, what kind of seem like to me, just abrupt stops. And then it kind of kicks back into gear, then it stops abruptly again, and then kicks back into gear. Okay, so some of those double stops, I have to admit, did sound pretty nice. We can't get those. I guess we could, but we don't do that in the guitar version. And I think drawing attention to some of those chords, some of those harmonies that are going on there, sound nice. Maybe not needed, but I definitely appreciated being able to hear that and some of the attention that the player brought to those. So for those of you who might not know this piece is actually supposed to be an etude. It's not supposed to be a piece. It was written as a tremolo etude, even though we play it as the most famous tremolo piece. But the way it works in the violin is it's really starting to sound like just some etude for violin. So those are my thoughts. Again, you guys can let me know what you think of the violin one. Maybe you guys love it. Maybe you guys hate it. I don't know. Anyway, next instrument. Okay, so this next one is going to be a saxophone trio, I believe. It's going to be 2 alto saxophones and what they say is a baritone saxophone. Basically, this person decided to take the alto saxophone, one of them, and move it down the octave. Anyway, let's see what they got going on. Alright, so right off the bat, what I like about what they're doing is just like in the one we heard earlier with the piano and flute, they have this opening introduction, which I think sounds pretty nice. I think it sets up the piece a lot better. But because they're doing all 3 voices to make that opening thing happen, not only will they probably have this nice clear melody sustaining over, but they're also able to have separation between the bass and the inner voice. Because they're playing a wind instrument, they can sustain that note for just as long as the person can breathe. And if they can circularly breathe, then I guess they can sustain forever. So one thing I'm sure that you guys can see is this guy is doing the whole entire thing totally by himself. He just recorded different parts and then pasted one over the other, which is cool. We get the idea. I think that makes it hard to be much more expressive with what he's trying to say. And if this was actually done in a live setting with 3 different people playing the parts, I think we would hear some of the things that hopefully he wants to do a little bit clearer. Okay, so maybe I slightly take back what I said before, because I do like how there is that like nice sustaining bass line and we can hear the inner voice. I think at some spots, from what I'm hearing here, it gets a little bit distracting, mostly just because it almost sounds like it has this chorale-like texture, which I don't think that's what Terega intended when he was writing the piece. And I think having too much going on, at least hearing too much of it, kind of takes away, makes it a little bit more confusing. It sounds nice, but I think it sounds a little too much. It's supposed to be a simple little song. As I said before, it's actually a study or an etude. I think with the three voices being that clear and that in your face, it just gets a little bit too heavy, a bit too thick. Anyway, next instrument. Okay, so this next one we're going to see is going to be the ukulele, and to me what makes this one a little bit more interesting is that the ukulele, unlike the other instruments that we saw before, is kind of close to the classical guitar. So I'm really curious to see what people do when it's an actual classical guitar piece being done on the ukulele. And I'm hoping that they do the tremolo technique or something that sounds kind of like it, maybe the ukulele version of that. Anyway, let's go ahead and let's check this out. Okay, so first off the bat, I'm going to say, honestly, it looks a lot harder on the ukulele. It seems a lot more demanding on this. You have such a smaller neck, smaller spacing, and to find those notes exactly, well, shifting that much, because guitar players, you know how much you have to shift from one spot to the next to even play it on guitar. Playing it on the ukulele, I imagine, is that same kind of difficulty, but a little bit tougher, just because you have a lot less room. I think the tuning of the ukulele, I mean, I know there's other tunings, but the one that's the standard one, as far as I know, where you have the highest string on the, what would be the lowest string number, so in this case, string number 4, it kind of gets in the way because you have this note in the bottom that's now higher than the melody at times. I think that can be a bit distracting. So as you guys probably heard before, this opening bit sounds okay. I think the problems don't arise until you start going up. When you get up to that area where you have that high C note, and anything beyond that, that's where you kind of start getting confused. What's melody? What's accompaniment? Overall, it works, just not all of it. But let's skip ahead. So right there, that's definitely one of the spots where I'm talking about, where it gets a little bit unclear of what parts are doing what when you're that high up on the ukulele. On the guitar, we have these low open strings that we can use to cover our ground and have actually a nice disconnect between the melody and the bottom. On this, it's just a little bit unclear because of the tuning. So the ending works. As a guitar player, it was kind of disappointing just because we're used to that nice full arpeggio, and then we have this high chord followed by that big, finally arriving at home low chord. I think just because of the range of the instrument, you just can't get some of these things on the ukulele that you can get on the guitar, and unfortunately to me, those are some of the big highlights of this piece. Anyway, let's go on to the final instrument. So this last one's going to be the piece being played on the marimba. I've seen very good marimba players play, and they have some pretty cool techniques, so I'm curious to see how they pull this off. Okay, so surprisingly, this one is somehow the closest to what is done on the guitar, and it's the instrument that is the furthest away. What he's doing is he's using one hand to make the tremolo technique by, I think, what it sounds like doing octaves just back and forth, and then he's using the other hand to create that bass line, which my guess is that this is pretty tough to do because the hands are doing two totally different things. One of them has to stay stationary except for when it changes notes, and the other one is moving constantly to make that bass line. I'm very pleasantly surprised with how nice this sounds and how they were able to take this thing that was done on the guitar with a very guitar-like technique and still make it work on this instrument despite it being so far away from the guitar family. Okay, so all of the other issues that some of the other instruments had, this doesn't have because you can use it in the same exact way as the guitar. You don't have these weird stops when you're trying to slow down and be a little bit more musical. You can actually make it happen because you have two different things going on. I think the person playing it also has picked a very nice arrangement without trying to overdo it like we heard in some of the other ones. He's sticking very true to just what was in the original guitar score. Obviously he's reading off of probably music that was meant for his instrument, but he's sticking very true to what was done on the guitar, and that's why I think it works so well. So one more thing I want to add is I think why this works so well is because just like the guitar, the marimba doesn't have much sustain, so the only way to create the same kind of effect is to do the exact same thing that the guitar does to create that effect in the first place. Now, yeah, there are a few things I don't like about it. I don't like how, because it's an instrument where everything is just all here, we have all kind of the same tone. I can tell what's melody and what's not. With this, I think it's a little bit harder to see the difference just because he's doing both. And it is tough to do that with guitar, but we have the advantage of using different kinds of strings to at least separate those two a little bit. Alright, and the last comment I'm going to make about this, on a side note of what I don't love, is just that because it's very much like the piano where you have to move from place to place, we can't really sustain one note without letting it get chopped off. And with the guitar, you definitely can do that because you can kind of create the illusion of one note ever so slightly sliding to the next one, which would be nice to hear, but unfortunately on this we can't do. Okay, so like I said, I think the one that I actually liked the most, honestly, despite all the things I just said about it, was the one that was being done on solo marimba. I think it's just because in terms of the sustain and the decay of that instrument, it's probably the most similar to the guitar of what it naturally can do. And I think because of that, it allowed us to have to imitate it in the same way that we imitate it on the guitar, which kind of worked. Now, personally, as a guitarist, I think that my favorite one is going to be the guitar one, but maybe someone that has never heard either or might actually like it on another instrument more. They might think it sounds a bit better. They might think it sounds a bit more the way they think it should sound. If any of you are that person, definitely go ahead and let me know in the comments. I want to hear what you guys think, definitely. Anyway, that's all for this video. If you liked what you saw, definitely go ahead and leave a like down below. That would really help out the channel and let more people see the video. Like I said before, of course, leave comments down below letting me know your thoughts. I'll try my best to answer and read all of them that I can. And if you really like what you see on this channel, I highly suggest to go and check out other videos of mine. And if you like those, even consider subscribing to the channel so that way you're updated about future videos. Anyway, I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks.